Hey, shalom to you all. Once again, we are now here in Sarasota, Florida. Some people think that Florida is only Miami and Orlando, but Sarasota is here. And we have Frank Gaffney, the president of the Center for Security Policy here in the National Security Policy here in the United States of America. And we're going to be talking to him in a few seconds on his radio show. We're going to be talking probably about the issues to do with the Middle East, with the Temple Mount, with Israel, the relationships between Israel and our best ally, the United States of America. But we will also be talking about, he talks about security, but society is also part of a person's security. And we'll be talking about the revolutionary project of Amitzim, the project for the widows and the orphans. And so we'll be on very, very shortly. We're going to hear Frank. He'll be talking to us on the radio, and I'll be responding. You're welcome to join. It'll be beginning in just a few seconds. We're waiting for Frank to call. But meanwhile, I can tell you that we are here. We are hosted by Kevin and Donna Jessup from the GSA Global Strategic Alliance Society Organization. And they are really promoting, they're those who led the return, the global repentance movement. It's going on, it's leading from, started off in Washington, D.C., and it's going to go all the way around the world till Israel. And that's a part of the redemption process of the world, where people from all over the world are recognizing one God, one world, one God. And so everything we're doing here is part of this project, because the project talks about one world, one God. We all are going to return to one world, one God. We're going to repent, one world, one God. And we're going to be rebuilding God's temple. But part of the preparation for the rebuilding of the home of the Lord, the King of the universe, is to build homes for his children. God is the father of the orphans, the protector of the widows. And with Amitzim, the Israel Organization for the Young Orphans and Widows, we are here strengthening the families of those that God told us to. It's a major divine mission, because we have to understand that when a person loses a father or a mother, the source of our connection to God, the source of the blessing to God, which goes through the father and the mother, this family needs strength. Doesn't need a box of food. Doesn't need a blanket. Doesn't need a shirt. They need strength, because the source of the blessing for a child comes through his parents. And when there's one parent surviving, it'll go through that parent. And we have to make sure that parent is so strong in order to be able to serve as a source for the blessing. So here we are, as I said, here we are, as I said, in Sarasota, Florida. We're speaking on the radio shows, we're speaking on many TV shows, we're speaking in different churches, and all about one thing, about how we promote the redemption process of God by touching the hearts of humankind and calling upon people. You know, when a person harvests his field, the Bible teaches us that he has to go to the temple and tell God, I did not forget the orphan and the widow. So here we're coming in, speaking with Frank Gaffney.
Is that Kevin?
Frank, yeah. Here's Rabbi Yehudah Glick.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Shalom, Frank. How are you?
Shalom, Rabbi. How are you, sir?
I heard you're best friends with this wonderful man in the world named Kevin Jessup.
Well, he's one of my best friends for sure. I'm
Well,
not sure that I qualify as one of his, because he's got a lot of them. But,
well, anybody who's friend, you can check a person by the way he chooses his friends. If Kevin's your friend, then I know who you are.
Yeah, well, he is that, and it's the other way you know people is by their enemies.
Well, I can tell you that Israel's best friend is the United States of America. And it's been that way in all the administrations, but we definitely remember very well the Reagan administration. And we heard that one of Ronald Reagan's best advisors was a guy named Frank Gaffney. I'm sure you heard of him.
Well, this is, it sounds as though you've been talking to my good friend Kevin Jessup, who has a way of exaggerating things a little bit, but that there is some truth to that. Yes, there is some truth to that.
Oh.
You also had a good friend in Donald Trump.
Yes, Donald Trump. But that was already God pulling the strings.
Yeah, no kidding. Sadly, there was something else was going on. I think of it as spiritual warfare myself, but I'm anxious to figure out what you would like to talk about, because I've got no prep on this at all, even really much on your background, and I'm reading about you on Wikipedia, and it sounds from what they've said about you that they like you about as much as they like me, which is not very
well.
much.
Did they say the most important part of my biography? That I'm married to the most wonderful wife?
No.
It doesn't say that?
I haven't gotten through it. I'm looking at the assassination attempts and so on. So
those are minor events in my life.
Frank, I emailed you the bio with the whole background. So
it's all right. Okay, we'll talk. Look, we'll be happy to talk. We're very much involved in the Temple Mount. We're very much involved in the connections between Israel and believers of the Bible around the world. And right now we're here on a campaign for, we call it also security, but it's a society security of families that have lost a parent, the father or mother. And we are promoting the Amitzim. We in the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation are promoting the support of the orphans and the widows. So we can talk about any of those topics. Here we are in the center of town from Sarasota, Florida, and we'll be happy to talk about all of those topics. And anything you want to raise, whether it's for Ben and Jerry's, or Iran, or Temple Mount, or Jerusalem, or Israel, or my wife, you can choose.
Okay. Well, I think for my audience, which as Kevin knows is an American one, I think predominantly.
So we're not going to do the interview in Chinese? We'll do it in English. Okay, that's a good idea.
Your English seems impeccable. My Hebrew's not so good. Chinese is definitely out. But what I'm anxious to do, I think, is probably get your read, if I can, on the state of the U.S.-Israeli relationship and kind of the situation in which Israel finds itself at the moment. In fact, I spoke on somebody else's radio show this morning on Breitbart News, and I said, when you look back at the situation Israel was in just 7 months ago now, and compare it to what has befallen in the interval, this is not a good thing. Not good for Israel, not good for us, not good for the region, I think. So that's kind of my point of departure for my conversations with most of my friends in Israel, including your distant relative, I assume, Carolyn Glick, who's a longtime friend of mine and colleague at our Center for Security Policy.
She's a fabulous person, even though she's not my relative. But many times people bump into her and they say, send regards to your husband Yehudah, or they bump into me and they say, wow, your wife is wonderful, Caroline. But we're not related, and she's not at fault at any of my sins.
Good. Well, anyway, so a kind of overview on the state of the U.S.-Israeli relationship, maybe starting with where we find ourselves at the moment with Israel. That will allow us to talk about Iran. I honestly don't know much about the Temple Mount, so I might finish up with that, just asking you to talk a little bit about that.
You don't know about the Temple Mount? I thought you're the American professional in Islamic studies.
Well, a little bit. I know what they think of the Temple Mount, but I'm a little unclear about the scriptural pieces of it and what it portends that you're rebuilding it. Other than I think that brings on the end of times, does it not?
Yeah. Well, so listen. You know what? I trust you. Lead the conversation, and I'll be with you, and I'm sure we'll have a good time.
And Frank, just a question. This is taped and will play at a later time tomorrow or whenever, or is it live?
It'll probably run tomorrow night.
Okay.
Kevin, we're definitely full up for today, so
Okay.
this is for tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
We'll probably go for about 17 minutes or so.
Okay. No problem.
So let's see how much hay we can make. Okay? And in terms of, Kevin, I've got a couple of things from you. But I'm not seeing a bio, I don't think.
No, I sent you an email with the invitation to interview Glick, and attached to the email was a bio of him.
I've got an invitation
To host him?
There's an invitation, and
Probably came from either myself or Allison or Juan, so.
Spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And then there was a Learn to Do Good, Seek Justice executive summary. That's on the orphan families. So I'm not seeing the bio.
The bio is a separate attachment?
I've got interview questions.
Okay, so look, it's not too much. I mean, I was born in 1965. I made Aliyah in 74. I'm bachelor's in Jewish education, master's in Jewish history, and I served as a member of the Israeli Knesset from Likud between 2016 and 2019. I am now the president of Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, which deals with raising the awareness of Jerusalem in the world, and as a world center for peace and shalom.
Okay, and
you were the
you ran for the Likud nomination for president. Is that right?
Yeah, I was a candidate for the Israeli president in the last elections just a few months ago, but I decided to move aside and allow the wonderful president, to take the job, and I didn't want to risk his chances, so I decided to move aside.
And remind me of his name, please.
Yitzhak Herzog. Isaac Herzog. Isaac Herzog is our Israeli president right now.
Okay, right. Okay, well, let's see what we can do.
Okay, let's go. Shoot.
And I appreciate very much the chance to visit with you. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. We're back, and I'm very pleased to say we're going to visit for this next segment with a man I've heard of for some time, but I've only just met by phone today. His name is Rabbi Yehudah Glick. He is a former parliamentarian in Israel, an American who made Aliyah from the United States and is now a citizen of the state of Israel. He was a candidate for the Likud party's nomination to be president of Israel, and is these days the president of the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation. A lot to talk about with him about what's going on in Israel at the moment and the U.S.-Israeli relationship and more. Rabbi, it's very good to have you with us. Thank you for joining us here at Secure Freedom Radio.
Thank you so much, Frank, and it's really wonderful to be here in the United States of America, Israel's greatest ally since President Harry Truman.
It certainly has been, and I hope that will continue to be the case under the present administration. We'll come to that in a moment. But first, I was commenting on another radio program this morning, 3 to 1, yesterday, about a perception that I have that the state of Israel's status, or at least its situation, has changed rather markedly over the past 7 months, in part from the high point of Donald Trump's presidency and the very close relationship that he had with your former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and the kind of things that they did together in terms of recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the movement of the embassy, the recognition of Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights, and of course, not least the Abraham Accords, to a situation in which Israel finds itself now with a parlous situation, I think it's fair to say, in terms of its government, and difficulties with the U.S.-Israeli relationship, and questions being raised by the U.S. government, it seems, about a number of things, including how it wishes to see Jerusalem treated as the unified capital city of Jerusalem. Give us sort of the 30,000-foot perspective, if you would, Rabbi, as to how things look from Israel in those regards.
Okay, Frank, first I'll be glad to. And as you said, really, Donald Trump was a wonderful friend of former Prime Minister Netanyahu. I just want to start off with, as I said before, the United States of America has been Israel's greatest ally since day one for President Harry Truman until today with all the administrations. But some of the administrations, the chemistry between the president and the prime minister were on a higher level, and some of them there were friction. But always, the United States of America has been Israel's greatest ally. I can say that the peak of everything was definitely the time of Donald Trump, who we said if he does one of 10 things, he will be it'll be wonderful. But I think he did at least 9 of them. That means recognizing Jerusalem as the capital, moving the American embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing the legal settlements in Judea and Samaria, recognizing that BDS is anti-Semitism, recognizing the annexation of the Golan Heights, and several more issues. And I think that Donald Trump and Netanyahu saw things eye to eye, which has definitely brought Israel and brought the whole region into a much better situation, including as you mentioned, the Abraham Accords, something that we could not have dreamed of just a few years ago. That's 5 different peace treaties. But I think the peak of all was the cancel when Donald Trump realized that the agreement with Iran was endangering the state of Israel, and he totally canceled that. Unfortunately, President Biden came into power, and his cooperation with the Palestinians, meaning tolerating terror attacks, meaning supporting and being a little bit more tolerant to things like legitimizing terror, and trying to make this treaty with Iran is something that definitely raises worries. Now, I can't say that President Biden is not a friend of Israel. He tries to be, but at the same time, he's trying to play politically correct with some of the world's greatest evil people. And here we have to be very clear, because when you try to satisfy people who are leading terrorism, you are not promoting peace. You are giving the terrorists, the people, an appetite to do more. And we have to be very clear. Radical Islam, radical political Islam is something that is very cruel. It's something that has to do with leading terror, and we have to be very careful. It does not mean that we're not for making peace. As I said before, the Abraham Accords was wonderful. Israel would love to make peace with Muslim countries, even the biggest one, like Indonesia. But we cannot tolerate any kind of promoting terror, any kind of country that calls for the destruction of the state of Israel. We cannot tolerate the fact that the Palestinian Authority is allowing terrorist organizations like Hamas and the Islamic Jihad to freely work in Judea and Samaria. And these are things that the President of the United States, Biden, has to be aware of. And we are watching this. And has to oppose it. Yes, I think that President Trump...
Let me ask you, Rabbi, you mentioned Hamas and Islamic Jihad operating in the West Bank areas, Judea and Samaria, as they're historically known. They've also, of course, been operating out of Gaza. And there was a recent, very ugly war between Palestinians in Gaza and Israel, in which large numbers of rockets and missiles and the like were sent from Gaza into Israeli communities without regard for human life. The Israeli military, as it assiduously does, sought to retaliate decisively, but with great regard for human life on the other side, particularly civilian life. How would you net out where things stand now in the wake of essentially the suspension of those hostilities, but clearly not the resolution of the underlying conflict?
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, every few years, the Palestinians, the radical Palestinian organizations from Gaza try to check us out and see how we were going to respond. And last time, when Prime Minister Netanyahu was in power, we didn't tolerate anything, and we definitely gave back a quite clear answer. On the one hand, the Iron Dome, which we received from the United States support of, and it protected our civilians, but at the same time, we passed on a message to the Palestinians in Gaza that we are not going to tolerate. And Israel, though, was very careful not to damage innocent civilians. We were totally not going to tolerate anything else. What is going to happen the next time? God forbid, we don't know. And we hope that the present administration, just like the previous one, will support and understand that the security of the state of Israel is important for the United States of America, and is important for anybody who believes in freedom in a democratic country, the only democratic country in the Middle East. But I want to point out that the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad organizations are trying to use another so-called sensitive place to raise and to encourage incitement and harassment and terror, and that is the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount, which is the holiest place in the world for all believers in the Bible. And we at shalomjerusalem.org are promoting the centrality of this place. Once again and again, that the Palestinians are trying to use, to exploit this holy place and to promote terror from the holy mosques. And I can't believe that anybody in the world who thinks that a house of prayer should be used as a house of incitement, harassment, and promoting terror. And we have to be very clear. The United States administration has to condemn and not tolerate any kind of violence coming from the Temple Mount or using the Temple Mount as an excuse. And at the same time,
I'm sure that we've heard that clarity out of the Biden team. If anything, I'm very concerned, and I imagine you are, Rabbi Yehudah Glick, about the Biden administration's reported interest in opening a consulate in East Jerusalem, essentially a consulate for, the Palestinians, even a sort of embassy to the Palestinians there. Talk a little bit about how that fits into this larger context of the struggle over Jerusalem as the unified and capital of Jerusalem, of Israel.
Yeah, I would remind the listeners that in the first 19 years of the state of Israel, Jerusalem was divided. And that meant that we had Jordanian soldiers shooting at civilians every other day in Jerusalem. At the end of the Six-Day War in 1967, Jerusalem was united, and we don't have those snipers in Jerusalem shooting at civilians, and that's the way it has to remain. And every single time anybody talks or anybody hints a possibility of dividing Jerusalem, it gives those extreme zealot organizations an appetite to try to once again convince the world that it'll be peaceful if we divide Jerusalem. And here is one thing that I said Donald Trump understood, and he agreed, that President Trump said Jerusalem will not be divided. And I think that this message has to continue, because Jerusalem is united, and that means we're a democratic state, but Jews and Arabs can work together, live together, but it is only one city. It's a city of God. It's the city of the holiest city in the world, the city of God's throne in the world, the divine presence of God is the world. And this is what it's a biblical city, and it has to continue being in the hands of those who are promoting peace. And dividing Jerusalem will not lead to peace, vice versa. It will guide and encourage those who are looking to raise the tension in the region. And we saw again and again people were telling us, no, if we go harsh against the Palestinian terrorist organizations, there's going to be war. And we saw the 4 years of President Trump were the 4 most safe years, the least terror attacks in the area for several decades. So we have to understand very clearly the right way to deal with terror organizations is not to give in to them, but rather to be very stubborn and determined to fight them.
Rabbi Glick, one other facet of this recent conflict, which seems, as I understand it, to be a continuing problem even after the cessation of the latest round of hostilities, namely attacks on Israeli Jews by Israeli Arabs, something we haven't seen, I think, since essentially the founding of the Jewish state. What was that about? How did it come about? And if it is indeed ongoing, what are its implications?
Yeah, this is definitely, you put your finger exactly on a very worrying issue. The Israelis who are living coexistence or living peacefully in Israel, deserving complete all civil rights. I mean, they vote for the Knesset, they're members of Knesset, and they're part of Israeli society. And suddenly, when the Hamas called out for a religious war against Israel, suddenly we found ourselves in some of these mixed communities, Arab citizens of Israel, going out and cruelly attacking Jewish citizens, cars, houses, schools, synagogues. This was very worrying. I must say it surprised us all. It surprised people who really believe in peace, and this is something that has raised in Israel a discussion. And I think the message to the Arab population is now becoming very, very clear. You want to live peacefully amongst us? You're welcome to do so. But if you think that the tolerance of the Israeli society towards the Arabs living amongst us is a sign of weakness, if you think that our reaction towards violence is just like a wink of the eye and we're going to ignore it, no way. No way. We are not going to allow people from amongst our citizens to fight against Israel and to endanger and risk the stability of the state of Israel.
Yeah, it's eminently sensible. Of course, I think in any society that would be the case. Let me ask you to turn to the threat that you described at the outset, Rabbi, and that is from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And what we are witnessing, especially with respect to the efforts being made by the Biden administration to resuscitate this odious so-called Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and otherwise, I'm fearful, not just empower, but embolden the mullahs of Tehran. Where does this currently stand as you see it, and what are the implications for Israel, and what is Israel going to do in the event that something like this eventuates?
Look, I must say that the Israeli society is unanimously against the treaty with Iran, and I think Prime Minister Netanyahu managed to convince President Trump, and they were hand by hand, understanding the danger of making any kind of treaty with a terror country. Unfortunately, it seems like the Biden administration are once again making that same mistake as President Obama did, and trying, let's give them a chance. But when you give terror a chance, it is a very great risk for the stability of the Middle East. It's a danger for people who truly believe in a God whose name is Shalom, whose name is peace. And I think we have to be, anybody here in America has to alert the risk and be very concerned. And I think anything we can do to warn the present administration about the dangerous impacts that something like that can happen are extremely important. And therefore, I call upon the Biden administration, please sit with the Israelis. We are very professional about this issue. We know we have a wonderful intelligence. We have all the information, and we can show it to you. And giving in to pressure from the world is not for the sake of peace in the region. And the way we saw when the tough hand against terror was strong, we managed to sign 5 peace treaties in the region with Bahrain, with the Emirates, with the Saudis, who hate Iran just as much as we do. And therefore, the right way to do it is to understand who are the evil and who are the good.
Right. I don't know that you quite got to a peace agreement with the Saudis, though.
No. That's true. We didn't sign an agreement with the Saudis, but we did it with Oman and with Sudan. And I think under the ground, under the carpet, as they say, Israel and Saudi Arabia are working closely. For political reasons, the Saudis did not finally sign the treaty, and that's your profession, you know better than I do. But I can say that the relationships between Israel and Saudi Arabia are greater. For the first time, the leaders of Saudi Arabia came out very, very clearly against the Palestinian political authority, and officially they didn't sign a peace treaty. We were very close. I am sure if President Trump would have continued, we would already be behind after that already also. I do hope that the President Biden understands the importance. If you imagine if Israel and Saudi Arabia are living under a peace treaty, I think it would change the world.
It would reshape that region, that's for sure. I'm so grateful for your time, Rabbi Yehudah Glick, for your vision of a more peaceful Middle East and what needs to be done to try to get us there, and how close we were under the previous administration to real breakthroughs. And I hope that we will. In fact,
we believe we will
see it done under this administration as well. In the meantime, sir, thank you so much for your insights. I hope you'll come back to us here at Secure Freedom Radio. It's great to talk with you.
Thank you so much, and God bless you.